Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me here on the very first episode of Yarns for the Soul with Nicole. That's me. I wanted the first episode to be a short introduction about me as your host and what you can expect from the rest of this podcast. So I'm your host. Each episode I'll be introducing you to a different guest of mine, and we'll be we'll be yarning about a whole range of topics, anything, everything, and diving in deeper to one particular topic with each guest. My hope is that these will cover almost anything from mental health, stories, how we've overcome tough times, being a young female professional, the struggles that come along with that, to the other end of the spectrum of online dating, the importance of, discovering and prioritizing your true self and how you go out into the dating world. So I really do hope there'll be something in here for everyone. You're welcome to pick and choose based on the topics that resonate with you, but obviously I would love if you joined me for every episode along the way. Please send in your feedback, any suggestions, any topics that you want to hear. Everything is welcome. Thank you so much for being here. If you're already hooked, you can head along to Instagram, follow this podcast at Yarns for the Soul, and I can meet you there. There will also be a link to the Instagram in the notes for this episode too. So I've been trying to figure out how to introduce myself. That's always a really awkward part. You meet someone new and they ask you, how would you describe yourself? What do you do? All of those annoying small talk type questions. And as much as I don't enjoy talking about myself, I am now giving you a whole introductory episode. I think my friends would probably describe me as a little bit quirky, probably quite sarcastic, and dog obsessed. Any opportunity to hang out with someone else's dog, given that I don't have my own, I'm there. Recently I feel like all I've been doing is dog sitting, which, fine by me. One day I will have my own dog, and I feel like at that point my life will finally be complete. I've always enjoyed reading, such a nerd, always been a nerd, it's great. Of course, I'm interested in podcasts. The main theme has actually been true crime. I love having a podcast on while I'm driving, especially longer distances. I feel like someone else is in the car with you and you're part of the conversation. It's not weird. It's fine. Favourite podcast of all time is probably my favourite murder. It's hard to explain if you've never heard of it because it's technically a comedy and true crime podcast. And at that point, most people look at me strangely, which is fine. And if people didn't think I was strange enough, I sometimes tell them that I fall asleep listening to true crime comedy podcasts. Maybe I should stop telling people that, and it might make everything flow a bit better. But other stuff that I listen to, it's a lot of sort of like personal development, interviewing amazing, inspiring, motivational people, a bit of spiritual stuff chucked in there. Anything by, Brene Brown, fantastic. Love her podcast and resonate with all of her work into vulnerability. Everything that she says has definitely kind of stuck with me. In the last sort of 6 months or so, I was actually introduced to a podcast done by Leanne Rimes, who was the singer back in the day, and she has these amazing guests on each episode. So I quite like finding something new and just diving in, picking a topic that I like, listening to random episodes, and choosing which guests sound interesting and rolling with that. So obviously I hope that that's something that my listeners will enjoy doing with my future podcasting. how else do I describe myself? Oh, I'm definitely an introvert at heart. I was quite glad in my early 20s when I kind of found that language of introvert, extrovert, and feel like I had some more tools to really understand myself. And so now that I know that that's what I am, I definitely get energy from being by myself and recharging. So that's usually something that I lead with so that people don't get too offended if I tell them that I'm done with people for the day and I just need some alone time. But I think this is part of probably why reading and podcasts appeal so much to me, because it's a way that I can kind of fill up my own time and my own space, and I'm still learning and still growing and feel like I'm interacting with people and I don't have to, which is great. Other than that, I'm a massive Netflix fan as well, and recently Disney Plus, thanks to a friend's login. Thank you so much. You know who you are. Especially on Netflix, I love all of the true crime documentaries. One of my favourites is, what is it called? There's a girl at the Cecil Hotel, something or other, somewhere in America. It's always in America. And she goes missing. And that documentary is an absolute roller coaster, and I highly recommend. On top of that, other favourites are The Sinner and Mindhunter, which are a good combo of crime, drama. I've always been interested in the true crime stuff. I'm not quite sure where that comes from, whether it's sort of some dark place in my psyche, but I just find it fascinating learning about, obviously there's horrific stuff that other people do, but also looking at why they do that, kind of the human experience, what happened in the upbringing, all that jazz. Bit more about me. I grew up in small town, New Zealand, very small. Grew up on a farm, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And then after that, I left to study at university for 5 years after that. I was always a nerd, as you might have guessed. I always did well at school, so there were never actually really any other options presented to me other than going straight to university when I'd finished high school. But I distinctly remember, I think it was the careers advisor at high school, we were talking about, what are you going to study? And she said, well, pick something that you're good at and pick something that you're interested in, and everything will kind of just fall into place. The answer to those questions was completely easy for me. I was like, I know what to do. I'm going to do a history degree. And that was definitely my favourite subject at school. I knew I was good at it. And then the careers advisor asked, well, okay, so what kind of job are you going to get when you finish? What are you going to do with your history degree? I thought, well, that wasn't one of your questions, so I don't actually know. I had no real idea what I would do beyond, I guess, a teacher or a librarian, and none of those appealed to me at all. So, but now looking back, I kind of wonder how different my journey might have been if I had just stuck with doing an arts degree. Who knows? But yeah, somewhere along the way, it was suggested that I study law because I was a good writer. I could write essays, which now looking back, writing a good essay has nothing to do with being a lawyer, but that was really what my decision was based on. Luckily, in the first year of university, there was only a couple of compulsory papers, so if I didn't like it, I tried a bunch of other courses, just to see what I was interested in, and then 5 years later, I had a law degree. Don't really know what happened in the interim. I didn't actually enjoy most of the compulsory courses. It wasn't until like 4th and 5th year of uni that I got to choose my papers that I really enjoyed kind of delving into human rights, international law, criminal justice, all the fun stuff. But I could see then how my kind of love of history connected in with all of those ideas. looking at the historical, political, social issues and seeing how that all kind of led and merged together to to end up with the laws that we have today and how those change over time. So, finished my degree, spent a semester studying overseas, went to Sweden, of all places. Kind of just a process of elimination. I knew I wanted to go to Europe for my exchange, and there was only so many unis that we had a exchange partnership agreement with, so that kind of narrowed it down. And I didn't want to go to an English speaking country. Thought if I'm getting myself all the way to the opposite side of the world, I want it to be a bit different. So yeah, I ended up in Sweden. There was about 5 months of study and then a month of travel after that. I think I actually returned back to New Zealand 6 months to the day after leaving. And for those that know, with StudyLink and student loan, if you are overseas for more than 6 months, you start paying interest on the loan. So I ended up having to write to StudyLink and kind of say, well, it was 6 months to the day, so no, you're not going to charge me any interest. Thank you. But yeah, so worked as a lawyer. 5.5 years later, I had worked in 4 different law jobs in 4 different cities all over New Zealand. Somewhere along the way, I found time to do my master's degree part-time, and that's in international law. It's an area that I'd still love to practice in one day, work overseas, but I remember looking at opportunities and seeing that basically at a minimum you needed a master's to even get your foot in the door in that type of work. So that was sort of the motivation. We'll see if that actually happens and if I actually use my third very expensive piece of paper or not. But yeah, the work that I did across all of my jobs was interesting, challenging. What did I do? Represented criminals in court on a daily basis. I got to speak to men in prison about their childhood trauma, assisted coroners with inquests. I think one of the highlights was assisting the chief coroner with an inquest on the Chatham Islands, that was a fun work trip. And we even did a site visit to the mortuary after the court hearing because the chief coroner wanted to see it. And one of the key issues in the case was the fact that the island had no functioning fridge in the mortuary, which is all a bit grim. So fair enough to say I saw and heard a lot of stuff. And I realised sort of partway through my legal journey how much that I enjoyed the storytelling aspect of law, and it took me a while to kind of click and piece together how important that part of the job was and how much that actually really resonated with me. I mean, as a lawyer, you're kind of taking information from your client, you're sifting through to figure out what's actually relevant, what's helpful, and then taking information from any other relevant sources or the law, bringing it all together, and packaging that in a way that sounds good and effective. For the most part, I enjoyed spending time with the clients as well and kind of building those relationships. Not all clients, definitely not all clients. Some of them were great. But I enjoyed digging deeper into their backstory, figuring out what their why was. Why did they do what they did? Why are they here today? Why are they in the justice system? And it was an amazing and humbling experience to be able to sit with people and clients and build that relationship and have them trust you enough that they're willing to share some super personal details about their lives. I never gave myself enough credit, I think, along the way, that I was able to be that trustworthy person for them, and kind of acknowledging that I was able to go from meeting someone for the first time to having some sort of small talk, building that kind of relationship, and creating a safe space for them to share often some super heavy traumatic details, and then creating a space for them, where they feel safe doing that and being able to walk away at the end and feel like you may have helped them, or at least, you've given them that space and opportunity to share, when often some of them had never talked about this kind of thing to anyone in their lives, and they didn't actually have anyone there who could be that type of support for them. So the work, it was also really hard, obviously, super emotionally and mentally draining. And it wasn't really until I took a break from law at the start of this year, 2022, and realised how much I'd actually just been in survival mode for all of my legal career. It was definitely not a healthy lifestyle. Always stressed, always overwhelmed, no matter how hard I tried to push it away or suppress it. I think my body was almost constantly in fight or flight mode. And I had some personal challenges along the way through those 5.5 years. So kind of built on and exacerbated all of the stress that came up with the type of work that I was doing. One of the first things was after New Zealand's first main lockdown with, I'm not going to say it, the C word. I found it really hard returning to work. And the first time in my life, I was dealing with some quite intense anxiety on a daily basis. It was to the extent of waking up every single morning, going to work, feeling absolutely nauseous. And I thought I was hiding this from everyone around me, from the managers, and I was still, for the most part, on top of my workload. But I didn't realise that it was so clear to everyone else around me that I was struggling. In the end, I took medical leave. I went and got a medical certificate from a doctor and had, I think, just over 3 weeks off in the end to recover, chill out. But that was actually the best decision looking back. Since going through it, I am definitely an advocate for proper mental health, well-being support at work. I am a strong believer that employers in all areas need to be doing more than just the bare minimum. And I was so grateful that I had, family and friends who were supportive during that time. And it was a good reminder for me to acknowledge that the work I was doing was super tough, and that I am and will always be more important than the work. It wasn't really until I had people on the outside, visiting family and stuff during that time, and they said, well, of course you're stressed. Of course you're taking time out, because the work you're doing is really hard, and of course it's draining. Whereas when you're in it and you're in the trenches alongside each other, you don't have that perspective. And it's so hard, because I would look at my colleagues and think, well, they're coping, so obviously I have to cope too. But that's not always the case, and you don't actually always know what people have going on in their own lives. You don't know that everyone else is coping. That's just how it looks on the outside. So I definitely now make a point of trying to talk about it, and hope that me being open and sharing my own experiences will just be an encouragement to everyone else around me in my life and my community to acknowledge that, life can be hard. Everything's always hard. I mean, in law in particular, and the type of work that I was doing. And it was kind of during that time off and getting some more sort of perspective, I guess, of what I was doing and where I was going with my life. Like existential crisis. Why am I here? What am I doing? But through that, I kind of reconnected to or dug deeper into like my spiritual side and spent more time thinking about that. What is my reason for being here? And it made me realize the work I was doing wasn't sustainable. I couldn't keep working in the way that I had been. And I knew that maybe someday it'd be great to have the flexibility of working for myself, and then I can take mental health days whenever I like. It's amazing. And during that time, I listened to, podcasts on spiritual stuff, personal growth, and I was amazed that when I started sharing this side of myself, just how many people who were already in my life but actually had a similar spiritual side that I never knew about. And it was so powerful for me to share that with them and make those new connections on a deeper, kind of more spiritual level. But yeah, the most massive curveball that no one would ever have imagined or predicted or wanted was when I was 25. My dad was diagnosed with cancer. So he had lymphoma, which is a type of blood cancer. Never heard about it before. Most people probably never have, and that's great, At the time, I was actually living at the opposite end of the country from my parents. I'd recently moved up to Auckland for my second law job, and I was actually just about to start the first set of lectures for my first master's paper. So everything in my life was kind of chugging along. I had a sense of direction. I was delving into this new study, which I was excited about. And then everything kind of just hit the fan, basically. And looking back now, the following 6 months after that is really just a bit of a blur in my memory. And was kind of just on autopilot, going through the motions, turning up to work every day. I don't really know how I did that looking back, which is probably just a testament to how much my body and my brain kind of were able to carry on and were able to just survive when all I probably wanted to do was just stop and not do anything and not move ever. It was in just over 6 months after he was diagnosed in January 2019, my dad actually passed away. So it was a fairly quick process. And after they stopped his treatment, he went downhill really fast. But my grief, that's something it's always going to be there. It's something that I carry with me every day still, and it comes in different forms. I sort of see it as being like a suitcase, like it's something that, or a bag of some sort, like I'm carrying it, it's always there. Some days I don't even notice the weight of it, like I'm conscious it's there, but it's not weighing me down, whereas other days it's like a concrete suitcase that I can't actually lift, and I'm not getting any forward movement that day, but that's something that I have kind of come to accept. Everyone sort of says that like the first year is the hardest. You're going through your year of firsts, first birthdays, Christmas, Father's Day, all of that jazz, without your person being there. You're adjusting to whatever your new normal may look like. But for me, I've called it my grief cloud, which hung over me for over 2 years, probably, after he died. You're going through a process of figuring out a new normal that you never actually asked for or wanted. And your future looks different to how you'd imagined it, although those sort of future events in your life. And I never had a particular vision of myself getting married, but one of the first things you think about is, well, cool, now who's going to walk me down the aisle? Little things like that you never really thought about because you didn't have to, but now you're getting used to a future where that's just not going to be possible. And yeah, when I was under my grief cloud, I think everything was just hard. I was always exhausted. I had absolutely no spare energy to look after myself, let alone commit to work, to friends, to having a social life, all of that sort of stuff. And was again kind of just going through the motions. Still not sure how I turned up to work every day, but was definitely not like my full self at all for a very long time. In the last sort of 3-4 years of my life have now been marked by grief. So when Dad died, I still had all 4 of my natural grandparents. I had kind of extended family members had passed away, but was not really that close with them. So I hadn't actually experienced grief as such before. And now today I have 1 natural grandparent left. So this is definitely something that is now part of who I am. And I've been in the trenches. I've been there in survival mode. So I hope that by sharing my story, I can give others something to relate to find some sort of comfort in, knowing that you're not alone. And if you're one of the lucky ones that hasn't experienced grief or grief in this sort of way, then maybe I can help provide some context of what it's like and how you can support others in your life who might be going through this type of grief as well. And I think it's a particular, losing a parent is inevitable, but losing a parent before their time, I was 26 when my dad died, and that's just something that no one should have to experience. So I hope that at least me talking about it, shedding a bit of light on it, can help create some awareness around it and some understanding, and at least knowing that you're not alone, knowing that everything you're going through is completely okay and that you're not going crazy is sometimes like the most helpful thing that I could actually give you. About 2 years after he died, I finally went and saw a psychologist. I was just kind of feeling stuck, and I'd sort of spent those 2 years watching everyone else around me just carry on with life, which was one of the hardest parts. I sort of felt like I'd lost about 2 years. Everyone around me was taking like big steps forward in their career, or they had been saving and bought their first house, or they're settling down and getting married, and I'm like, cool, I'm just here surviving, but thank you. And it's hard not to compare yourself to others on the best of days. But speaking with the psychologist kind of helped put everything in perspective for me, so that I could start taking some steps forward finally. And there's so much healing, so much learning that I'm still doing, but I think one of the most helpful things a psychologist said to me was just relaying back that, you've been through some stuff, you've been through some hard stuff and you're still here. And I learned sometimes paying someone $200 an hour just to feel completely seen is actually worth it. And also being reassured that my body is strong enough to manage any of the feelings that I encounter, but also just to let everything flow through you. It's like everything comes and goes in waves. Everything is obviously shaped who I am, how I make decisions about my future. I've always been a nerd, always loved learning, and so at the end of last year, 2021, I quote-unquote officially started my personal development journey by signing up with a coach. So I've been doing courses through Untapped, and this has just been the most amazing journey so far, and the motivation I needed to make some really big changes in my life and dig a bit deeper into what I kind of want everything to look like, what is within my reach once I kind of really start backing myself and backing my abilities. I've met some amazing people on the personal growth journey alongside me, and have this whole new community that I can share my wins, my highs, my lows, share everything with. And it's amazing to have people that are doing the work alongside you, that are in the trenches, and having just the most amazing fearless cheerleaders has been one of the most inspiring parts of personal growth outside of the actual personal growth part. So this whole story, this whole introduction, it's kind of the motivation behind the podcast. Each step on my journey so far, I've come across these awesome people that are out there smashing it, doing amazing and interesting things with their lives. And, I'm sure you can relate. There's often people you meet once or twice and you kind of just click, you kind of just get it, you're on the same wavelength, on the same vibe. And I've really enjoyed meeting people along the way in kind of random ways, like chance meetings that you could have easily just not met this person ever. But it just so happens that you have. And I think, we've got something that we can learn from each person that we come across in life, no matter the circumstances. One of the most helpful tools for me, particularly looking back and dealing with grief and mental health stuff and all of that, one of the most helpful things has actually been to look for the lesson, look for the learning, and that applies to, I think, our experiences as well as people that we come across. I think sometimes people come into our lives to be a mirror to ourselves and encourage us and challenge us to look inward, to figure out what's really going on and why we're responding, what our ego was up to. While other people, I think, just show up to be epic inspirations and motivators for us. Both types of people are just as valuable, and definitely think that what I've learned so far is the universe doesn't throw things your way that you can't handle. It's just a matter of kind of digging in, working through it, finding your people. And that's really the motivation behind this, is bringing you all into that world and having some epic yarns with people that I have met along the way. I know there's going to be more epic people in the next phases of my journey, and love learning from other people and hearing their own stories. So I'm excited to bring you this medium of storytelling, and telling other people's stories who have just epicness to share with the world. So for everyone that has stuck with me throughout this introduction, thank you so much. So glad that you're here. So excited for you to meet all of the guests, listen to all of the yarns, feel like you're part of Yarns for the Soul. So excited. Promise there will be something for everyone. So thank you so much for joining me, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon.